State government will engage.
Mr. Speaker, we think it might be wrong for you to say shoot the Boer, but we definitely don't think it's wrong for you to say that 90% of South Africa's wealth is held by white people. We think, importantly, what we need to consider when it comes to a limitation of expression is whether that expression is geared towards infringing on the rights of others. If that expression does not do that, then we don't think we have grounds on which to limit it. There's a lot of expression around that offers no value to society in a broad sense, right? I mean, I do philosophy, 90% of what I say offers no broad societal value. But that doesn't mean that that expression shouldn't be allowed. So let's look at our principled extension in this debate, right, which is clashed with somewhat by closing the opposition. So what we tell you here is that it's perfectly legitimate for you to present the facts. So it's perfectly legitimate for you to present what did happen in this interview. What we would say is that those presentations of the facts are not the things that lead to that violence, right? So yes, when closing says they might be geared towards creating an emotional response, sure, we think that's fine. We don't think gearing your speech towards the creation of emotion is problematic. Artworks, for example, have the primary aim of creating emotion. We think that's perfectly acceptable. Maybe they think anger is a particular emotion that's problematic. Again, we don't agree. We're very happy that the United States populace was angry at the Vietnam War. We're very happy that people are angry at the fact that women aren't treated with respect in India. What we're not happy about is how you interpret that emotion, right? So this is a separate normative belief that the appropriate response to an emotional feeling is that you need to resort to violence. We think the creation of the emotion and the presentation of the facts are perfectly permissible, and so we ought not restrict this documentary from being shown. There might be a problem with the individual's normative value system, but this documentary hasn't made any normative claims. It's never said you ought to go out and be a vigilante, and so we think this is the fault of the vigilantes, not the fault of the documentary. It would therefore be wrong, no thank you, to restrict its expression. An analogy that might help you understand this is that we know that a number of murderers have avowed that video games have led them to commit those murders. But we don't think that we ought to restrict the ability of game designers to express themselves, even though there's a minority, no thank you, of cases in which people potentially have responded badly to that, right? The second piece of exception we give is that it's fundamentally an undignified way to treat your society when you say that the average person in that society doesn't deserve to hear this because a minority of people might respond badly. We think this is important information to people, to know why people went out and did the things they did. If you're a woman, to have people have the ability to engage with the fact that a horrible atrocity happened to you and that this is something common in India. We think that that's something that you as a member of society have a right to be able to access, even if it's the case that a few people are going to respond badly to that. We think that in this sense, it was fundamentally wrong for the Indian government to take away this expression. We think it treats their society as children in a way that unfairly undermines the dignity and the respect as a rational person of the average person in India who didn't resort to violence. Yes?
You're being unreasonable when you said it was a minority that was causing the violence. But is it unacceptable for the government to retrospectively gauge media and its effect to cause anger and violence in society and then ban it?
I think we need to look at the person who's appropriately said to be at fault, and we ought to target those people, as opposed to targeting some sort of scapegoat who might play a role in the causal process, right? We think, for example, people who sell knives shouldn't be targeted for people who choose to murder using knives. We should go after the people who chose to commit that murder. Additionally, we think the state has a bigger claim to being responsible than this documentary as well. The fact that the police in India don't do anything about rape is disgraceful. The fact that the government systematically refuses to listen to women is disgraceful. They ought not be blaming this documentary for their own ineptitude and their own evil, right? We think that's something fundamentally wrong on the part of the state. Let's talk about this utilitarian justification, right? Because it's really a counter-consideration. It says, yes, we might accept that vigilantism is bad, but if the benefits of this discussion outweigh it, then we ought to allow this speech. Like, I've given the framework that you need for openings matter to stand in the debate, so they definitely can't beat us. But let me engage in that discussion, right? So let's talk about discourse. And what opening up has no idea of is that outrage is not mutually exclusive to constructive discourse. In actual fact, it often is necessary for constructive discourse. That's because not everyone's a vigilante, but certainly when there is this outrage and it's very public, that forces other people to engage in the issue, and we think that then they reach better decisions about it, right? They might mobilize in order to actually put pressure on the police to do a damn thing about rape, right? I think that's something really powerful in India, and even if they're so concerned about vigilantism, we actually think on balance more guilty people are hurt than innocent people, and so we're not even sure that the vigilantism is a bad thing to begin with in this debate. So, the final idea that they've got is that this needs to be a sort of a legislative solution, right? And we're undermining the power of the Indian government to respond in a way that deals with this legally. What we would say is we provide a catalyst for the Indian government to do something about it legally, where they've been shown up by not being able to deal with these problems when vigilantism's happening. That's when there's pressure for the police and for institutions of state to do something. Additionally, we think this might be counterintuitive. If fewer women come forward because they now know that this documentary wasn't shown because the Indian government care more about rapists than they do about them, we think potentially there's going to be even more vigilantism. So, on even a utilitarian level, which we think is like the most simplistic school debate or way of understanding the debate, we still win. So, for all these reasons, I think it's an absolutely abhorrent limitation of speech. There's no way that we can't win this debate.